Lovely. Well, my name is Laura. For those of you who I haven't met before, I am married to Andy, who you've already met this morning. You're going to be hearing a little about Andy as we go on through this morning. You can all look forward to that and start to take some notes. We're continuing this morning in our Make Room series. And as Andy mentioned previously, the title for today is Miracles in the Mess. What does it look like for God to make room and use mess to do it? In my household, there is Andy, there are 2 children, and I have to be honest, the title of this talk being about mess, it could be that I have spent my entire life preparing for this talk and this moment. In our house, Andy is definitely the most tidy person. I often feel quite sorry for him because the rest of our household must feel like his nemesis most of the time. Andy is tidy, Andy is organised, and the rest of us honestly just don't get it. I have had tutorials in how to hang the washing on the washing line in the right way. I have had tutorials in how to arrange the fridge properly, how to stack the vitamins in the cupboard in the most efficient way. And I do genuinely try, and you wouldn't agree with that, I do try, but I don't seem to get better. However, the war that I'm sure anybody living in any household can understand is the war of the dishwasher. Now, I have already been told that I don't have the facilities in order to load the dishwasher efficiently. And so, this is a picture that I took I promise you this is true, a couple of weeks ago before I went to work. Bless Andy, he really serves me beautifully. He stacks the dishwasher in our house. And I was working from home that day. Andy was about to go to work. He, bless him, had made me my breakfast on the side. It's in a bowl. And he said, Laura, just before I go, I've stacked the dishwasher and I have left this space just here for you to put your bowl in. Upside down, and then he walked to where, I love you, he walked to where my bowl was, and he went like this, beep, 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 beep. Got it? And then you're gonna put it on. I was like, got it, yeah, thanks, guys, I smashed it. I managed all of those things successfully, thank you, yeah, I'm a hero. On my TikTok algorithm, recently has come up this thing around type A mums and type B mums. So type A mum is like a mum who is tidy and organised and ordered and everything's arranged. And then I've had type B mums come through, and these are the mums who are much more go with the flow, relaxed, videos and shorts of mums taking their cup of tea into the car with them as they're about to drive, that kind of vibe. And then came up type C mums. And this is probably where I would self-identify, which is the beautiful chaos of being both. Sometimes I am incredibly organised. Not everyone in my household might agree, but I am. Sometimes I'm incredibly organised, but other times I'm really, really messy and disorganised to the point that I will regularly spend time looking for something that tidy Laura put away, but I didn't expect myself to do that, so the one place I didn't look is where it's supposed to be. This is kind of my life. I thought I would give you an example. On a Monday morning in our household, Andy comes to work a little bit earlier, and so I do the kind of last little stint of getting the kids ready to school and delivering them into the arms of the teachers. And Mondays this term and last term are a little more complicated than normal. On a Monday, my son goes in his PE kit, but he needs to take his swim stuff because it's swimming, and on this particular day, he also had another thing he was doing, so he needed 3 things sorting. But then on a Monday, my daughter has to go in her uniform, but at this point in the term had to take in her stuff for garden gang because she had that going on, and then there's the lunchboxes, the snacks, and the drinks. That's the Monday morning, and we were running late. So I was like, right, come on, Laura, you've got this. Lean into organisation. So got the kids together, got all their stuff, they were all dressed, they all had everything, got them to school, went into school in a reasonable amount of time, walked past the head teacher, the deputy head, the caretaker. I tend to literally take my children to the bottom of the steps so where I can see the door, so there is nowhere else for my kids to go, and release them into school. So I took them, I let them go, they ran up, they went in, and I breathed a sigh of relief that I had absolutely smashed it. At which point, a wonderful woman, God bless her, leant over my shoulder, and I just heard a whisper in my ear, "Your dress is tucked into your pants." And so I have my back to the playground, the head mistress, the deputy head, and it wasn't a long skirt, no. It was up here and my bum is out. And in that moment, I don't feel embarrassed anymore. It happens to me too much. I just thought, like, this is how it is. Like, I can strive for organisation. I can strive for things to be tidy. But the reality is, as much as I try to get things right, there is still always mess. There's still always something going on, something that's not quite right, something that I'm wrestling through. And it's this mess that I want to spend some time talking about this morning. You see, we don't like mess. We don't like disorganisation. We don't like it when things feel icky and complicated and hard, and I get why. Because we feel out of control. Because messy situations can make us feel vulnerable. We have to be vulnerable about what's going on inside of us, about maybe working out some difficulties in a relationship with other people, addressing maybe some mental health stuff that's tricky. It doesn't feel safe. But sometimes, I wonder whether God allows mess so that we can see more. And I wonder whether, rather than trying to push away that mess, God's actually inviting us into the mess because the miracle is on the other side of that mess. We're going to look at Mark 2 today. Thank you. The guys on visuals are much better than I am. Do you want to go back and we'll go for that? Thank you. Mess doesn't mean mayhem. It can be what's needed in order to make room for more. Thank you so much for your kindness. We'll crack on. Great. Mark 2, 1-12. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. They gathered in such large numbers that there was no room left, not even outside the door. And he preached the word to them. So men came, bringing to him a paralyzed man, carried by 4 of them. Since they could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus by digging through it, and then lowered the mat that the man was lying on. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralyzed man, "Son, your sins are forgiven." Now some of the teachers of the law were sitting there thinking to themselves, "Why does this fellow talk like that? He's blaspheming." This word is like he's kind of being disrespectful to God. He's mocking God in some way. Who can forgive sins but God alone? Immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. And he said to them, "Why are you thinking these things? Or which is easier, to say to this paralyzed man, 'Your sins are forgiven,' or to say, 'Get up, take your mat and walk'? But I want you to know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins." So he said to the man, "I tell you, get up, take that mat and go home." He got up, took his mat and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone. And they praised God, saying, "We have never seen anything like this." You know, in that time, in Capernaum, the place where this story is set, it was a small fishing village. There will have been like a synagogue, like a Jewish teaching space that Jesus could be in. But for whatever reason, that day he chose to be in someone's home. Hospitality was huge in that culture. So having lots of people in your house would have been a real blessing. And people wanted to be around Jesus. He'd been around long enough now that there was a sense that Jesus was doing something, that God was doing something with this Jesus. There was like a push towards him. And if you think about our culture and our society at the moment, I feel like that's a bit of what we're seeing again. That there's this interest in who Jesus is, in what God's about. People are wanting to move into spaces where God is to find out more about him. And so this is what we experience in this space. People wanted a front row seat for Jesus. And I get it. Because, and if you are here and you don't normally come to church and you're exploring faith, this is as true for you as for anybody else. The closer you get to Jesus, the more you see of him. And so I can understand why people that day were packing out that house to be around Jesus. A few weeks ago, Andy mentioned that we really enjoyed going to Glastonbury Festival. We went a few years ago, and we went one afternoon. There was about 200,000 people at Glastonbury, so it's busy. And we went this one afternoon and decided that we were going to try and get close to go and see Ed Sheeran. Wasn't a good use of time. Retrospectively, it was fine, but it took hours. Like we went to be close and close to the stage. We were waiting there for hours. And during these hours of waiting, trying to stay hydrated, I needed the toilet. So I went, and it took about, I reckon, 30 to 40 minutes to get to the toilet. went to the toilet, then had to start my journey back. And of course, it was getting busier the whole time. It took me about an hour and a half to get to the toilet, back to where my friends were. Partway through this, for those of you who know, there's a band called Biffy Clyro. And they played partway through. And I then realized that the only way that I could get to where I needed to go was right through the mosh pit. So I'm like bouncing my way in the direction of where my friends are to try and get back to them. But it was really, really hard to get access. It was really hard to get that spot that I wanted to be. Why? Because everybody knew that the closer you get, the more you experience. And so actually, what happened in that moment is these beautiful, well-meaning people, 100% get it, were blocking my access. In this story where we see Jesus heal this guy, the room was no longer big enough for the people that wanted access to Jesus. And this is very much the situation that we find ourselves in at the Hales Owen kind of location service. Isn't that wonderful? That something is going on and the room is no longer big enough to hold what God is doing. And what I found on that day at Glasgow is that I was having to reposition myself and push through and make my own space to try and get to the place that I wanted to be, because other well-meaning people were actually blocking my access. Now, what we are doing here is that we're trying to create a third service to create more of that access. We're trying to make that space. And it's really, really important we do. We saw that from the first story that we saw earlier on. People were so busy in that moment receiving that actually they missed out. Because the person in that story in the Bible who actually needed Jesus most couldn't access Jesus because everybody else wanted to be in that space. And then what happens is that we in this room miss out on stories like we saw this morning because we don't get to let those people into space that we're in. And so when we begin to make room, when we begin to go, okay, well, let's create another service. Let's sign up for the dream team and serve a little bit more. Let's look at, could I look at going to a different service time? Could I not have to have my seat at the 9:30? We're clearing the side so that people who want an easy access exit, just in case they're scared, can run away, and that's okay. It's not okay. Keep talking, Laura. Don't dig yourself a hole. Don't be scared. I promise we're not that weird. But we need to create space here so that those who need Jesus most have access, and then we get a front row seat to their stories. There was this one gig I went to. It was years ago now, and I can't actually remember anything about the event except for one individual. I can't remember where it was. I can't remember what city it was in. I can't remember even who I went and saw. But as a 5'4" person, when I go to a gig, I have difficulties. Anybody who is above 5'4" is a real challenge in a gigging space because you just can't see. You can't see past people, around people. And I remember I went to this one gig and I was stood there and there was a particularly tall line of people in front of me. And so I kind of had contented myself that I would just listen. But this man in front of me, who was really tall, noticed me and said, "Oh, do you want to go in front of me?" I was like, "Please." So I went and stood in front of this man. And he went even further. He was wearing a backpack, and he took off his backpack, and he put it on the floor and said, "Do you want to stand on that?" And I did. And so it's the best view I've ever had. This guy, absolutely bent himself out of shape, was willing to get his bag in a total mess so that I could have access to that gig. I don't remember the gig. I don't remember what happened. But I remember that man who was willing to make space and room for me, who was willing to get his own stuff in a mess so that I could be in that space. It really did mean absolutely everything. As soon as we become people who are passionate about other people finding Jesus, we have to accept that there will be mess. It becomes inconvenient because we know of people who don't know Jesus who we really want to. And so we need to go out of our way to connect with those people, spend time with them, help them to see the Jesus that we see, be praying for those people. It may well mean that we end up having to re-navigate our Sundays so that we can be at different services to create one. We'll give more time to serving. If we are passionate about seeing people come to know the incredible Jesus that we know, it is unavoidable that we will have to work through some of that mess ourselves. However, if you are new and you are in this space and you don't know Jesus, and what you're worried about is that you are bringing mess into this space, then I need to say to you, please, do not worry about that. We are already here and we have a lot of mess. The mess that you bring will only fit in with ours. We are not here because we have everything nailed. We are the people that stand in playgrounds with their dresses tucked into their pants. Like, you don't need to be worried about being too messy or complicated to be in this space. But for those of us who come to this space regularly with our mess, I'm okay with mess, but let's not be exclusive. And so encountering Jesus in this story is really important because mess doesn't mean mayhem. It can be what's needed in order to make room for more. And so we talk about encountering Jesus and being in the same space as him. But the real cost, whether you follow Jesus, whether you don't, isn't encountering Jesus, it's hosting him. Like really being willing to host Jesus in our lives. And if we are willing to host him, and I will explain what that means in more detail in a minute, then we better be ready for what he's going to bring. A little while ago, probably about a year ago, a wonderful friend of mine, who shall go unnamed for reasons you will see, invited myself and our children, not our children, we have children. I'm going to start that again. A friend of mine, whose my children are not theirs, the three of us went to their house. This is going brilliantly, isn't it? And you will notice that Andy wasn't with us, so we were left unsupervised. And we went into our friend's house, and this friend of mine and his partner are absolutely wonderful. They had bought a brand new house with brand new things, and they didn't have children, so they could do things like buy a white sofa. And you can see where this is going. And we went into their house, and my friend is a wonderful human being, and we're like, just got kids, do what you want. Da, da, da. Like, they ran around investigating. And then we went into their living room, and the kids were given squash. That's the right noise. Some sort of like blackcurrant squash. And it didn't stay for very long in the cups and went all over this white sofa. It turned out that it was quite an expensive sofa, and quite a lot of money had been paid to, what's it called when you officially properly clean the sofa? Yeah, posh clean it. The week before, a lot of money had already been paid to do that because my friend had already got a mark on the sofa. And so we spent most of the afternoon trying to find creative ways of getting this blackcurrant juice out of their beautiful white sofa. When you really, with all your heart, want to host someone in your space, you have to be willing for whatever they bring in with them. We talk about this idea of hosting Jesus. In 1 Corinthians, it says this: "Do you not know that your bodies are temples of the Holy Spirit who is in you, whom you have received from God? You are not your own." And so wherever you're at this morning with God, whether you have followed Jesus for years or maybe you're not even sure that you want to, but you're just checking out church today, this idea of allowing Jesus access to your life, of hosting him, of letting him, make a home in a sense in your life. To truly host him, it means making space for him and what he wants to do in your life so that he might impact the world through you. That's what kind of hosting Jesus looks like. But it can feel quite messy. If you imagine the story in Mark that we read, where everybody's in there. Now, the houses at the time would have had stairs at the side, flat roofs. The roofs would have been made of clay and grass and bits. And a man or woman, whoever it was, hosting this space, hosting Jesus doing this teaching, would have stood there and probably been pretty pleased with the situation initially, looking around, everyone's leaning in, this is brilliant, Jesus is top notch. And then all of a sudden, he'll hear people, a kerfuffle, going as people go up the stairs and onto the roof. Now, that might not have been too much of an unusual thing in that culture, but all of a sudden, bits of clay or dust or something just begin to settle and get in people's eyes. People kind of look up to see what's going on. And then maybe chunks begin to fall in people's clothes and in people's hair. And Jesus stops teaching and kind of looks up to see what's going on. And then before you know it, Bits of your roof are being ripped off and little faces appear. Now, if this had been me in this situation, I have to be honest, my attitude would not be, yes, more people have access to Jesus. This is wonderful. I'd have been there like, it's such a mess. Who's going to fix this? This will cost so much money. Well, I won't get anyone round here quickly. This is so inconvenient. All these people now are going to go and say, oh, you know, when you were at their house and the roof fell on your head. Like all this stuff going on as the host of this, like properly hosting Jesus in that moment would have really caused problems. It would have been inconvenient, messy, awkward, and yet I feel like I would have had a real challenge in focusing on what the mess that that someone was making rather than the access that had been created. I think in that moment I would have been much more caught up in what was being ripped up rather than what God was wanting to do. Because often the miracle is on the other side of the mess. But when you're in the mess, it's really hard to focus on anything but that mess. When Jesus really gets involved in our lives, there are things he wants to rip up, things he wants to challenge. Maybe offense in us, in a relationship with somebody else, pride in us, anger in us, with somebody has treated us or someone we love in that way, and we're just really like raging about it. Maybe in us, it's our own comfort he wants to rip up so that we're not too dependent on ourselves. Maybe it's things that are good things, but actually have become a bit of a crutch in our lives where we depend on them instead of depending on God. Maybe it's anxiety, broken relationships. He wants to rip these things up. Let us engage in that mess so that we can find the miracle that is on the other side of that mess, because God won't make you deal with that mess on your own. And I wonder when we're in a situation where we sense that there is something in our lives that's complicated, something in our lives that's messy, are we willing to walk towards it? Let Jesus into that mess so that a miracle can be found with it? Or are we so focused on being what's being ripped up that we actually freeze and can never get to the miracle on the other side? Maybe for some of us it is the idea of a third service and coming and giving time to serve, or kind of being willing to navigate to a different service so that people can access Jesus from themselves. But I wonder for us, what is it that God is wanting to rip up so that he can create space for something different? A number of years ago, Auntie and I probably had been married, for about 10 years. And we began trying for kids. We were kind of just curious, like to see if we get pregnant, to see whether we could. And as the years went on, we weren't. We went to the doctors, we had tests done. Oh my goodness, the test took ages. It was really frustrating. And all of this time, you're wondering what's going on. It feels like mess and it feels like complicated. And sometimes you feel stretched and things really hurt. But what I would say is that in all of that time, we never doubted that God was doing more. That although we were sat in this, what felt like mess and complication, that actually God was ripping something up to do something different. And God actually called us to adoption, which has been messy, if I'm honest. One of our kids' teachers said to me this week, "Oh, it's nice to have you back on my contact list on my mobile." I was like, "Yeah, isn't it a joy?" And so sometimes there are situations that are hard and difficult. But what does it look like to walk into that mess, going, God has a miracle on the other side of this? I just don't know what it is yet. But I'm willing to engage in the mess so that I can get to the miracle on the other side. Often making room for God to do more involves engaging in mess and not shying away from that. And so whether it is a mess of what's going on in our own lives, whether it's the mess of having patience with the staff team here while they're trying to navigate getting to 3 services and what that looks like and all the confusion of that, are we willing to lean into mess in order to create more? You know, in this story, the friends of that man absolutely blow my mind. The friends of this man who are willing to haul their friend across town, lift him onto a roof, because this was never going to be their miracle. They were willing to engage in the mess so that the miracle could be someone else's. They lugged their friends up there. They got dirt under their nails, were willing to rip off this person's roof, possibly at the expense of having to pay for it later themselves, so that someone who really needed to be in front of Jesus could have that encounter for themselves. And I would love to be that passionate about other people seeing and encountering Jesus. When I first started following Jesus, I wondered whether my life would become simpler and less complicated and more ordered. And then eventually I would just be so ordered and things would be so perfect that I would fit perfectly into heaven and it would all go wonderfully. What I found is that isn't the case. Jesus has brought so much to my life. And if you are here today, inquiring and just have questions, and please sign up for Alpha. Jesus has transformed my life, and I never, ever will need to live a day without him again. And he brings peace and comfort and security and purpose and so many things that I can't even begin to describe. But it hasn't got less messy. If anything, Jesus gives me what I need to walk towards mess and go, do you know what? Let's untangle this and get to the miracle on the other side. And I wonder whether for some of us here today, there is mess going on for us that we've been kind of trying to shove to the side. But God's going to say, no, I want to engage in this with you because there is a miracle on the other side of the mess. In Mark 2, verse 12, it says this. He got up, took his mat, and walked out in full view of them all. This amazed everyone, and they praised God, saying, we have never seen anything like this. If the mess hadn't happened, they would never have encountered the miracle. In order for them to see something that they never even began to dream that they would see and be on the front row of that, they had to make room for it. I wonder whether if you're able, you would stand to your feet for me. And we're just gonna, if you've not been in church before and this is feeling like it might be a bit strange, I promise it's not gonna be strange. I'm just gonna ask God to fill this room and us with a sense of peace. And in that peace, I'm going to ask God just to bring to mind if there are areas of our lives where maybe there's either mess that he wants us to engage with, or maybe where we have a lot of comfort and he wants to get some mess on the table. And I'm going to ask God to kind of bring that into your mind. And if God does bring something to mind, then maybe pray about that. But in a second, we're going to keep singing and we're going to keep worshiping. And when you're ready, just join in. But I'd love to take a moment to pray. Jesus, rightly or wrongly, our lives often seem so busy and chaotic, so full. And God, it becomes easy to turn up the volume and avoid the mess. Or to keep ourselves so busy in our comfort that we don't realize that we have become comfortable. And so, God, would you fill us and this room with a sense of peace and stillness? God, would you make room in our hearts and minds for your voice? And God, if there is a mess that you are calling us to walk towards, if we've clung to comfort, and God, you're calling us to let go and embrace a little bit more mess, and God, would you just give us a nudge? And God, as we make room, would you help us to have total confidence in the miracle that you have for us on the other side of the mess? Amen.